Hi everybody, I'm Mark Nicholas. Welcome to the home dressing room here at Lord's as we begin to construct MCC's review of yesterday's inaugural World Cricket Connects event. A lot of famous names, England performances on that board, but round this table are people who have made great pain for England on this ground. Graeme Smith, Kumar Sangakkara, Justin Langer and Lisa Sthalekar have all beaten England here at Lord's. Having said that, Clare has also led England to victory on this ground against South Africa, so that sort of slightly rebalances things. Also with us is Sanjog Gupta, Head of Sports at Star Disney. So we've got a heck of a crew here to wade through what we uncovered yesterday. And I think first up, amongst all of that was governance. Now, we had three keynote speakers yesterday. Greg Barclay, chair of ICC, Manoj Badali, lead owner of Rajasthan Royals, and Diana Pukitapu-Linden, who runs New Zealand cricket, but is also chair of New Zealand's Olympic Committee. They all made massive contributions. But as I say, we're going to start with governance. Sir Andrew Strauss made the point that you can't use an old system to govern a modern game. So let's begin with Kumar Sangakkara. Kumar, of course, leads our MCC World Cricket Committee. Your thoughts?
I think Strauss also said that is it about safeguarding the status quo or really looking at what the fans are telling us, what the trends are and where the game is heading and being ready for that and anticipating that and not just trying to fight existing fires. So it's quite a diverse group that presented quite diverse opinions, but I think there was alignment on the fact that governance was something that can be improved and looked at and rejigged so that it really does look at the game with an enlightened vision of leadership. And I think that's quite a good premise to start from. The 10 or 12 home boards that make up the ICC, and they have the interests of not just the world game, but also their own game at heart. And does that really lead to making the best decisions for the game? Also, is there a possibility to have the voices of the broadcasters, the rights holders, the investors, private equity, especially now with you see more and more common ownership, and big tech really being part of that decision-making drive so that the ICC chief execs and the governing body is informed properly and led to make the right decisions for the good of the game and listen to what the younger generation of fans are saying we want.
Lisa, you're head of the World Cricketers Association. Do you feel that the players have enough of a voice within ICC?
It certainly has improved over time, but certainly we still don't necessarily have a seat at that table, at that ICC board level. Through ICC Women's Committee and Men's Committee, there is a representative of the players that sits on those committees to pass on the information from the players and how they feel, especially what's going on inside the ground, the rules, regulations in terms of that. But also I think we've seen in certain countries an association with the national governing body and that relationship being really strong, the players become a real stakeholder and things can actually progress because at the end of the day, everyone wants the game to grow and be successful.
Sanjog, is it realistic to think that broadcasters and big tech could have not necessarily a place on the board of the ICC, but a place in the decision-making process of modern cricket?
I think it depends on what the purpose of governance is. And to the point that Sangha made earlier, I think it's important before starting to design what the governance structure looks like, to really define what the governance is for. And I think a question was asked yesterday, I think by Straussy and then by Sangha. What is this game? Is this game going to be hostage to the formats that it has been played in? Or as you said yesterday, it's just a game involving bat and ball and can be designed any which way that the fans want to watch it. And if we genuinely want fans to be at the center of this game all of us love and all of us want to see grow, then it becomes important for those who are custodians of fans to at least get a chance to speak at the table, if not have a seat at the table. If broadcasters have direct relationships with fans, if big tech understands Gen Z better than anyone else, if there is data available which tells you how lives are changing and how viewing habits are changing and how media consumption is changing, then why should all of that not be taken on board before deciding or designing the future of this game?
Aha, so I'll come straight to you then, Claire, because you've spent a lot in your many roles, a lot of time within ICC. So from the inside looking out, how hopeless does that feel sometimes when you're being pushed around by the big teams? Equally, do you think ICC doesn't stick its neck out enough?
So my role within ICC has been to chair the Women's Cricket Committee for 12 years now, which in itself actually is probably there's time for a change. Maybe Lisa could take that on. Yeah, I mean, Lisa is on the Women's Cricket Committee, and the Men's Cricket Committee is chaired by Saurav Ganguly. And just for people watching this who maybe don't understand the structure of those committees, by virtue of chairing those women's and men's cricket committees, myself and Saurav have a seat at the ICC Chief Executives table, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the chief executives of all the full members and also representation from the associate members. But again, it's very an insular group in terms of it's all cricket people. And then it's the Chief Executives Committee who make recommendations up to the ICC board. So the decision-making structure, as we're talking here, there is, because it's a representative system, self-interest is absolutely inevitable, and that's not a criticism because we all want various things to happen in the game depending on our perspectives. I think what it does mean, for example, for the women's game, if we're thinking about the huge kind of meteoric rise of the women's game and what that means for the next generation and for children and families and commercial models, etc., and broadcast, what that means is that when you get to the ICC board table, there isn't real expertise in the women's game. There isn't real expertise in some of the other areas Sanjog just referred to there. Because with all respect in the world, the people sitting at that ICC board table are mostly volunteer chairmen, many of whom have had prestigious careers and have served in the forces or have been very successful businessmen, but it's almost entirely male. And it is a group of people who are mostly volunteers with many other things going on in their lives, who attend a meeting every so often in Dubai or wherever the ICC board meeting's being held. And so is that, to sort of bring all of that together, is that the right group of people?
Yeah, is that optimal?
To be making phenomenally important decisions about the future of the game. And one of the points Manoj Badali made yesterday morning in his opening address after Greg Barkley was that the people in the room, in the long room yesterday, we're not the future. We haven't got the perspective of the 8-year-old boy or girl or the 18-year-old boy or girl. So if we haven't, then absolutely no chance has the ICC board got of having that perspective.
All right. I'm going to come to Manoj's speech in a minute. Graeme, you took the bull by the horns in South Africa, going out on a limb to create SA20, which has been a great success. It's well known globally that the cost of that last season was South Africa sending a third team to New Zealand for a test series. What came out of yesterday was a lot of people think it's time to make hard, tough choices, make a decision and say, listen, this is the route that best future-proofs our game. And it may be that there's sacrifice along the way. Do you see that as a tough and hard choice?
So let me say firstly that no way was I happy about the fact that a weekend team went to New Zealand. It's something that really shouldn't happen. But with the congested FTP and the choice that Cricket South Africa had to make to develop a product that helped keep them sustainable, attracted private investment back into the game, which not only helps commercially but also helps the cricket in the country. I think that's also an important point that a lot of people miss with private money. They don't realise that in countries like South Africa, you're bringing adults back into the room, best practice in coaching, best practice in medical, business opportunities. Our economy grew dramatically through SA20 as well. Over 4 billion was brought into the country, 8,000 jobs created. So it's people sometimes miss the point also about what this opportunity did for South Africa and South African cricket. And also for us to try and elevate 60, 70 South African players every year to keep South African cricket strong. And this is where I think sometimes the world game loses focus. If Sri Lanka fall away, West Indies fall away, South Africa fall away, what is the world game going to be anyway? You know, so the point is that investment, setting up SA20, was an opportunity for us to try and keep South African cricket strong. That's really what it was all about. So some tough decisions got made in terms of committing the best players in South Africa to that league for 4 and a bit weeks every year. With the FTP already existing, there are some challenges. I think things could have been better managed around that space. So I think that's the first point I need to make without criticizing anyone. But yeah, I think to develop the product and give it the best chance to be successful, and to, you know, with the partners we were able to attract, to really give them a product that they're happy to invest in, I think is important.
Okay, so we'll talk about reacting to the market in just a moment, because that's part of what you're saying there. You picked out the word humility from Manoj's speech, and it was repeated 3 times: humility, 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 amongst stakeholders. So the stakeholders have to sit back, look more objectively rather than subjectively at the game, and show humility in the way that they arrange themselves around modern cricket.
Yeah, and I think humility also comes, Graeme just said about best practice. Best practice in governance often means that you've got to get some independence as well. And if you look at the best practice in governance, you look at a skills matrix on the board, and I go back to, if you haven't got the best skills on the board and there's not independence, it's very hard to make those tough decisions. And there's got to be a degree of humility to take some of that self-interest away, get the best skills on the board so you can make those tough decisions, whether it's the FTP, whether it's women's cricket, whether it's what games we're playing. Get the best skills on the board, get some independence, and those tough decisions can be made. But that takes a degree of humility and alignment and respect that we all are moving in the same right direction for the game of cricket, not for the right direction for what is in our self-interest.
There was a very tense moment yesterday when one attendee stood up to suggest that actually ICC should form a completely independent board above the existing board that made decisions from an independent viewpoint. Another attendee stood up and said, absolutely not. It's completely the last thing that should happen to the game, because the stakeholders have to be involved in making the decisions. So there was a bit of competitive tension at times yesterday. Okay, that's a nice summary of that. So then we had one attendee suggesting there should only be 6 test match teams, and they should be run by a sort of UEFA governing body. In fact, he suggested MCC could do it, but that's a different subject. Then there was Ravi Shastri saying it would be a good time for 50-over cricket to move to 40-over cricket. Then there was quite deep analysis of regulation. Is the game over-regulated or under-regulated? Should the game be more careful about the way it constructs its schedule, or should it be a free-for-all depending entirely on market forces? So there was a lot to get through there, wasn't there?
There is, and that's the situation we find ourselves in. Someone also said yesterday that cricket is also spoilt for choice, which is a great place to be. I mean, the sport we love also has enough and more choices, but those choices have to be made. Everyone and everything can't be done. Everyone can't be pleased and everything can't be done. So you have to make hard choices. And there are very clear indicators of what fans want. And there is enough data available to suggest what direction the game is going in. There's a reason why when Smithy and team got together to make SA20, they didn't decide to do a test league or an ODI league. They chose a format which best suited the product they wanted to make, which they believe would be viable for the next 10, 15, 20 years, that would sustain interest of fans. And that choice is now being made because that's what fans want. The point about regulation is you should regulate, because at times, as Justin said, there has to be a balance between self-interest and collective interest. And independents bring that balance at times. That's how boards for organizations and companies around the world are created, based on skills and based on the purpose that you want that board to serve. There have been instances where boards have sacked themselves because they believed they were not fit for purpose, and which was a phrase used yesterday. But there is also this fear of regulating against the market, that the collective interest at times, as expressed by stakeholders, goes or flies in the face of what the reality is. If you continue to serve a product that no one wants, one, that product will continue to suffer, and two, the ecosystem around the product will continue to suffer. BlackBerry disappeared at some point. It was a device that all of us had, all of us were in the habit of using, and then it disappeared. And it was replaced by another product. Today, Apple's thinking about what does it need to make next, because the iPhone may become irrelevant at some point. So products have life cycles, and as custodians or stakeholders in sport, we must accept that the product needs to evolve to keep pace with the times.
Okay, great. So that leads me perfectly to a point I've noticed with you, a slightly changed approach to the idea of test match cricket, and a startling moment in yesterday's meeting when both you and Brendan McCullum, who'd previously been on the stage with me and then stood up from the floor, when asked if either Sri Lanka or New Zealand were not to be one of the 6 in a new formatted test match roster, you said, well, you know, it might have to happen and it wouldn't be the end of the world. That really shook the room. So I'm going to go straight from you to JL, so you be ready to come back on that. But just as briefly as you can, just describe exactly what you said and why.
Well, first of all, if you are making it 6, there has to be a criteria to pare it down to 6. So what is that criteria? Is it based on performance? Is it based on the fan base? Is it based on economics, the generation of money into the common pot, hopefully? And then you have Smithy, who rightly said that if countries that are currently playing this game and have been playing this game, if they weaken or they disappear, it affects the game quite strongly, because you want the best players, the best talent available coming now into the game. And then, you see, Test cricket is a very traditional game. We try to grow it into 12 teams, and those 2 teams are suffering because of Test cricket, and on the brink of bankruptcy if they do play Test cricket.
Yeah.
So it's never going to grow anymore. And even the current 10 teams, the cost of hosting Test cricket and playing Test cricket is prohibitive. So it's been propped up by money being thrown at it. So, and it'll continue to happen if the model doesn't change. Now, my emotional connect to Test cricket or to my country, I'm very proud of my country, our cricket tradition, and I'm here because of that, has nothing to do with what's right for the game. What's right for the game is that the game stays connected to the emotions of the fan, that they feel connected, they want to be a part of it. And for us to, going back to Sanjog's point, what is this game going to be in 10, 15 years? If you conceptualize that and be ready for that, that'll inform the governance structure as is, to really look at, okay, are we really ready for this? And if not, what do we need to change to be able to embrace that and generate the income that's required to sustain the game, to attract investment based on those returns into the game, and how do you grow the reach so you have more people that will consume this game? And not everyone consumes the game in just matters of format. There are so many supplementary, complementary, associated, connected ways of generating income that everyone, immersive experiences, gamified, the list will go on. And are we ready for that? So my take on Test cricket is very different. My take is on the game of cricket.
Yeah,
and
the
game of cricket can be played without being restricted to tests, ODIs, T20s. Tests are arbitrary, right? You had 5-day tests, 4-day tests, timeless tests, pink ball tests, day-night tests, your T10. You can change it whichever way you want, depending on why do you change those? To try and attract more fans to the game. Not just keep the fans, grow the game. So I love Test cricket, and I can go on saying it till the cows come home, but it is not going to make a single difference to what we should be getting ready for
Okay, so you would argue that there's more than just young fans.
Well, yeah, a lot came out yesterday about fans, and we saw Manoj's graph, and we talked about some of the youngsters, but we talked about what about the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds who love Test cricket or love T20 cricket, and my take on all this, and we're all talking the same language, is the unique thing about the game of cricket is you can play 10 over cricket, you can play 20 over cricket, you can play 40 and 50 over cricket, you can play Test cricket. It is unique, and that's how we keep growing the game, because all these different, now the FTP is a little different, but as long as people are watching the game of cricket, and we've got all these formats, and we've got 24 hours in the day that the broadcasters would love to have it on in different countries all day long. And then this time last year, I was at the Totteridge Cricket Club in London, and it was whatever time it was, and there was 59-year-olds, all in whites, playing T20 cricket. And they were having the time of their life, did it? Pat Cummins and Nathan Lyon were playing at Edgbaston in the Test match. And the kids are all there playing, and then two of the kids would run in and say, oh, there's 15 runs to get. And by the end, it was 10 minutes to go. There was 59-year-olds sitting there glued to the cricket. Australia won the Test match, and the kids were devastated. But that was the emotion of the game. And they could sit there, and they could watch that. And then they can still watch the T20 World Cup, where 1 million people turned up to watch India come home the other night. The T20 World Cup in the West Indies and America. And a year ago, they had a 50-over World Cup, Australia versus India in India. My gosh, this is the beauty of the game. Rather than trying to fight the game, that's how we can grow it. And if we have a Test cricket, I imagine from a broadcasting with all this technology, it goes for 6 hours in the day, for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and it can be in the background. And you don't have to sit there all day and watch it. You can come and you can have a cup of tea and watch a bit of it, and you get these little bites of Ben Stokes taking a spectacular catch or whatever. And there's bites in the game all day. And this is a beautiful thing of the game. We shouldn't fight it. We should grow the game by respecting the uniqueness of the game, that we have all these different formats.
So, go on.
I was going to say, but it's interesting. Obviously, with the World Cricketers Association, we do a survey of all of the current players, bar Pakistan and India. Got the numbers? Because I've got the numbers. Do you want to say it, or do you want me to say it?
No, go for it.
So, the most...
This is an exam question.
Yeah.
Mark does very well with numbers.
Jeez, okay, right. Most important format is Test cricket was 48%, but in 2019 was 82%. So the current players at the moment, it's not Test cricket anymore. And then we're also getting the data from the broadcasters.
And that's because the current players are changing because the fans are changing.
Exactly.
Right? So it's a cascading effect of an entire generation of fans, some of whom become players, changing over a period of time.
But the question was most important format. 48% of players around the world, not including either Indian or Pakistan players, because they don't have players' associations. So this was 13 countries, 333 players, and the T20 figure as the most important format had risen over that 5-year period from 11% to 30%. So, and it's interesting that the T20 World Cup had gone up too, as not yet being more important than the ODI World Cup. But I was going to go to Clare, but you've got something to say.
I mean, I think all of us, Sanga, Lisa, all of us, like JL's passion for Test cricket, we all, you can feel it.
A passion for cricket.
Yeah, but I'm saying...
But we do love Test cricket.
Yeah, we do, JL. I mean, I think that's not what any of us are saying. I think it's about being realistic sometimes as well.
It's also about limited resources.
And the fact that South Africa's got 2 Test matches every year, the minimum standard, is because they're looking at...
2 total.
No, 2 per season or whatever it is. So they've got the minimum.
England are playing 17 this year.
Because England
amazing, isn't it?
But because England can afford to.
Can afford to. That's
the
point about resources.
So I'm saying, you look at your broadcast deals, you look at your revenue lines, where people want to spend their money, fans, sponsors, broadcasters. It actually ends up outside kind of the bigger nations. It ends up bankrupting the other nations to play Test cricket, and that's what people don't understand. You put on a T20, you're earning more broadcast money, you're earning more sponsorship money, crowds are in, vibes good, you can play more of them in a shorter space of time. So that is the challenge for the rest of the world. It's not the passion for the game. It's like you've got to be realistic. We've debated it in the World Cricket Committee over and over again. You know, we've asked for ICC to put up money to protect Test cricket.
We have ring fence money.
But I'm saying it's not the passion. Yeah, that's what people mustn't. You know, you watch this. Certainly, the members. You know, we love Test cricket. I mean, coming here, seeing our, you know, the history we've got in these grounds of Test cricket for all of us is important. But you know, I think what we're debating is what the future of the game and being realistic about it.
Is it realistic for the women's game to pursue Test match cricket?
The format that has worked really well over the last 6 or 8 years, probably, with England-Australia women, was the kind of reimagining of the Women's Ashes that back in the day when we were playing was a 3 Test match series. That now is a multi-format series. So it's got quite a nice narrative. I think it's sort of, you can box it into about 3 weeks. So points attached to ODIs, 1 Test match and 3 T20s. So each game has a different number of points, each format has a different number of points, and it kind of maintains context and a storyline, which I think there was some conversation yesterday about the stories that we need to kind of tell and look after and take people with us. So we've started, I think Australia women have as well, we've started replicating that with South Africa women and India women. I think India women and Australia have done that. And there's a bit of appetite, I think, across the women's game to make that, to make more of that. One of the challenges is the New Zealand women, who are one of the top flight women's teams, or certainly in the top 6, haven't played a women's test since 2004. So some amazing players like Sophie Devine, Susie Bates, who sits on MCC World Cricket Committee. They've, you know, some of the greatest talents in the women's game to have come out of New Zealand have never played a test match. I think it's a really, really tricky topic. You know, as we all are, you know, I'm quite torn on it because some of my greatest memories are of playing a handful of tests for England women when I was a player. But now I see, you know, what's going on with the 100 and the women's game, and the players absolutely love the 100. It's given great visibility to the women's game that I don't think test cricket could give. And the kids, you know, the future players and the future fans, they absolutely adore the 100. If you ask, though, and JL, we were talking about it before, if you ask the players, the current England women, India women, Australia women, probably South Africa, I've never spoken as much to them, the greatest moments of their careers are when they pull on whites and play Test cricket.
Go on, you wanted to...
So, I mean, I didn't say it yesterday, but there was a moment through the day when I was actually thinking, trying to put myself... I mean, my boys are 7 and 10, but I was thinking if I was a young and up-and-coming cricketer today, how would I prepare myself for the future of the game? You know, we grew up technique-wise to play the longer form of the game. I mean, that's really... You know, our whole setup, the way we were built, leaving balls, technique tight, you know, good positions. If I was a youngster today, I'd be developing... Ignoring
I'd
be doing the total opposite. Yeah. I'd be developing a power game. My whole technique would be entirely different. It's about strokes that I can play to score. Would I develop more an all-rounder option? Because you're trying to make yourself as viable as possible to play the shorter form of the game.
I think we're seeing that anyway in the current young generation in test players. They've got all the shots anyway.
Yep. But this is where I think we see all of us coming from player backgrounds have biases, right? Experiential biases of a life lived in the game. And that's not always a good thing, in my view, when you're looking at the game. You must have a detached perspective to first understand what this game is and where it's going. Number 2, if you take the non-traditional formats, what has it done to aspirational cricketers around the world who can't get into a test side, who can't get into an international T20 side, because it's a very restrictive arena, and it has to be the best of the best will play. But now, broad-basing this reach through these non-traditional formats, as I would put it, has allowed players to bypass that very restrictive, very set pathways, and actually play on an international stage, reaching billions of fans, and having a career pathway that inspires passion and which in turn inspires others. And you also can inspire a love for the game for someone who might never pick up a cricket bat or ball. You can do it through the methodology, the technologies that you have. How many of us watch sport and enjoy sport that we will never play? We can do the same to cricket. It has to be attractive enough, well thought out, to be able to do that.
Can I make one point though?
Yeah.
Is that we often forget that T20 cricket is a very hard game to play. So we talk about, everyone can just go and play. It is a hard game to play, and ultimately the best's going to come in, like whether to play Test cricket or any cricket or T20 cricket. It's a really hard game to play.
Just quickly explain that, because it's quick and you have to think quick, or because you need different skills from the skills you develop as a child?
One, it's a difficult game, and that's why I think a lot of it's an old man's game, and you see a lot of former testers with decent techniques being successful. There's a few outliers who come in at number 7 and smack it, but it's a tough game because as a batsman, you walk in and you have to try and hit a 6 every ball, pretty much. As a bowler, the batsmen are trying to hit you for 6 every ball. So therefore, it's a very difficult game to play and to master. We all think, it's just it's not. It's a really hard game. Like Test cricket is a really hard game to play. Cricket's a hard game, but T20 is a really hard game to game. And one thing I learned through the IPL, Mark, and Sangha, everyone, I went to the auction. And what I recognised when I went to my first auction last year in Dubai was there's a lot more heart breaks than heart makes.
Yeah.
Because I went to this auction, and this was only the mini auction, and there was 300 people being auctioned. There's probably only 40 people who got picked up. So all the others are Mark Nicholas,
No.
unsold.
No,
Didn't make it.
Unsold. So all these people who won't get an opportunity to play in the high, because you've got to still be the best of the best to play. So it's a hard game.
So don't diminish it. In other words, so don't assume that it's not worthwhile.
Lesser form, yeah.
No,
Absolutely.
and I'll tell
T20
you,
is a great form of the game. It is and I love T20 cricket, but it's a tough game to play.
So I want to move this on because resources is the word, and that's driven, of course, by the financials. Let's come first to television. You've spent billions and billions of dollars sustaining the game. Is there any threat to that long term? Will television eventually have to make the decision about the way they spend their money based on the product they're given? Or I asked you earlier about whether television will have an input into designing the future. Where are we? Do you think as the model changes and improves and big tech becomes involved that television will have a bigger say?
I think this point around resources tends to be confused with money. The only resource that everyone's fighting for is attention. Actually, the thing that drives everything else in the game, the money, the investment, the team ownership, the success of leagues, the number of fans who come to the stadium, everything is driven by attention. And if the sport is in a preservation mode where we continue to serve a product which is garnering less and less share of attention of a fan for a fan, then you will have a problem. Because no investor, private equity, broadcaster, team owner, franchise owner, wants to invest in a product which is losing attention. Because eventually, it will shift away entirely. And that's why I think the point that JL and Sangha just made, more people engage with this game than play it. More people engage with this game on screens than watch it in stadiums. And that has to be accepted first, that more people will engage with this game in a passive manner than an active manner. And it's their attention which is actually paying for this game. The reason why the IPL players get paid what they do, the reason why SA20 is able to play players what it does, is because it's managing to garner fans' attention and drive investment in that product because stakeholders believe that the attention will continue to grow. So if data suggests that the engagement with the product is declining, then you can rest assured that the investment will follow, that the investment will decline as well. That applies to television, that applies to big tech, that applies to any stakeholder.
And that, of course, was very much Manoj's theme. He cautioned against the game's future being determined by those who can only see cricket in its old form as a mainstream sport. And unless it stays relevant and accessible to the next generation of fans, it will struggle to maintain that attention span. So that was a key paragraph in his...
The hardest choice that cricket has to make, and a lot of people around this table have to make, is, and I think Smithy's already made it, is cricket going to operate in preservation mode, or is it going to operate in growth mode? And it has to be a choice, because you can't do both.
As I said, the hard choices.
That's exactly.
And for growth, with some hard choices
100%.
and some sacrifices have to be made.
And that will happen.
Yeah.
You will have to sacrifice something because resources are limited. A player from South Africa, a player from Sri Lanka can only play for so many days. And whether we like it or not, it's a management principle. It's called Pareto. 80% of the value is created by 20% of the resources. So 20% of the players in the global cricket ecosystem actually create 80% of the value. And that applies to every league, every competition.
It's actually a truism about a lot of life too, isn't it?
True that. So if resources are limited, then those resources have to be optimally deployed. And that's where the hard choices come in.
Just on that, Venki Mysore, obviously the owner of KKR, mentioned about he puts himself in an uncomfortable position. He's being surrounded by people that will challenge his thoughts. And it got me thinking that maybe as administrators, we tend to, and even players, we don't like to do things that are a little bit different. We hold on to what we know and love and can be successful. But for all of us as players, in order for us to develop, in order to change techniques, you have to feel uncomfortable doing something. That means you're onto something. So therefore, I was thinking from an administration, governance, global perspective, administrators and board members need to be a bit uncomfortable in this next phase and make those hard decisions. Because if we're going to grow, it can't be status quo. It's something that we actually don't know.
Johnny told the story, right? Yes, in one of the sessions.
Johnny Graves.
Johnny Graves.
Who's CEO of West Indies Cricket.
He said the board invites its stakeholders to come and present what the stakeholders are seeing from the data about fan trends, accepts the truth or that data as facts, spends about half an hour on it, and an hour later it's forgotten because no one wants to actually acknowledge it. And you've sat in some of those meetings. You know how those conversations go. Everyone's accepting of all the data that is presenting, and then they go about doing exactly the opposite of what the data would require them to do.
So, spot on. I mean, I think the beauty of yesterday was that it's the first time, thanks to the MCC, that everyone's in a room and you can debate and you can have those conversations and challenge. I don't think that gets done often enough. And maybe that's something that the ICC can consider. The problem that you have is that when you leave those meetings, or everyone comes to those meetings, they're again coming with their own frame of mind and themselves first. And when they leave there, that's why they're not listening to the stakeholder, because they're thinking about what's best for England, what's best for South Africa, what's best, and so on. So that's the challenge that we debated on governance, really, is that in those meetings...
But didn't you sense a slightly different mood? Didn't you sense a more collegiate appreciation of the problem yesterday? No.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I did. But I still don't think it's going
to... I think the appreciation of the problem is a given. But what is actually going to do about it?
Well,
is
talking
real
now
crux,
and then everybody, getting this stuff out there more often.
Yeah, and
I'll tell you. I'll just add one. For the first time, I felt really good that there were former and current players, one, willing to listen to a different perspective, and two, actually assimilating that perspective and offering a point of view which was a balance between their own experiences and that perspective of how things are changing. And I found that to be refreshing, because otherwise the conversation that we tend to have is mostly a presentation of facts, deliberation, which leads nowhere. So, and I came up to you and said that to you as well, Sangha, which is, it was refreshing for a stakeholder to feel that the community genuinely acknowledges that there is a problem. And I think that's a start.
Right. I want to keep this going. There's two other main subjects. I nearly said subjects there. Clare, ECB, Richard Thompson, chairman, made the point that bilateral cricket was very important to England. 74% of revenue came from bilateral cricket. Now, I know that's a figure that you can apply sort of different ways, but it's a relevant point. And though there is a push for franchise cricket globally now, bilateral cricket still seems to matter to the big three for sure. Yes?
Yes.
Is that figure about right?
Yeah, it's kind of smooth.
But is it bent by the ashes?
So it'll be, significantly steep, greater number when we're playing Australia men, India men, than when we're playing Bangladesh or Ireland. But that is the smooth number, 74% across a broadcast cycle.
And also, if you organise your fixtures to be primarily between the three of you, you're going to have higher return.
Yes.
By definition.
Yeah.
I imagine that's the same in Australia as well.
Same in Australia.
So in Australia, there's the summer of the Big Bash and Test cricket, Boxing Day Test and the New Year's Test match. And this year, India are now having 5 tests in Australia and the Big Bash is happening. And so there'd be a mix, but the greatest percentage from the broadcasters would come from those bilateral, I imagine.
Okay.
So
Yes,
Cricket
Lisa.
Australia loses money on the years that India or England aren't
Correct.
there. And over a 4-year period, it evens itself out. So they're in the positive.
So actually,
everywhere.
tours between those 3 countries are subsidizing all the other cricket that the country is playing. That's what's happening. It's cross subsidy.
Sorry, and just let's add to that. From a Sri Lankan perspective, gone are the days when broadcasters will buy 4-year, 5-year rights. Now they will buy saying how many times is India
comes
touring,
Really?
and if we get that tour included. Now I understand it if Australia and England tour us as often, but they don't. Only India is willing to travel the world and play all the other boards that are struggling so that they actually can keep afloat and have the money not just to pay players, but also invest in the grassroots and have other players coming through.
Yes. So we then come to this revenue.
Can I just make one extra point on
please
that and
do.
just
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
the women's game in?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think might just be a light bulb that I haven't thought about before. I think the reason that England, Australia and India are able to invest so much more than the others in the women's game is because of that much higher percentage of money that they receive from men's bilateral cricket. And that's a challenge for the women's game because it is not a healthy game globally for women's cricket if we've just got England, Australia, India strong in the women's game. If you think of Sri Lanka, West Indies, New Zealand, Pakistan, etc., their economies are struggling for men's cricket. So Heather Knight made the point in the final panel yesterday, which I was thrilled that a player made that point of that kind of standing, is that in her opinion there should be some ring-fenced money from ICC's distributions, not for us particularly, England, Australia and India, but for the other countries who at the moment are not able to really grow and develop a structure for the women's game.
Okay, so let's come to that revenue distribution share. ICC releases, the exact figures around 600 million, I think, and 38% of that goes to India, about 7 and 5 to England and Australia, and then the rest is spread around the other countries and the associates. And the feeling was, even from Ravi Shastri, who stressed quite strongly that the days when Australia and England acted dictatorially running the game should not be followed on by India today. India should show pastoral care. Nobody, by the way, it's crucial to mention, nobody was remotely critical of India yesterday. In fact, everybody completely understood that because of India, the game continues to exist in the many formats that it retains right now. But looking forward, the feeling was that pastoral care for the rest of the game would be important. Would Sri Lanka put out that they get such a small share and therefore suggest that we should organise the revenue distribution model on what's needed, not what's available?
Well, the distribution model, the overall quantum of money has gone up.
Yeah.
So the reduction of the percentage has still meant that Sri Lanka gets more money than they did before.
Yes.
Yes, but a lower percentage.
A lower percentage, but overall more money than they had before under the previous model. I think there is an issue of unfettered spending. So, okay, what does Sri Lanka need is one thing, but also having an eye on how that distribution
How
is
it's spent.
Yes.
What are the milestones that you need to achieve in your domestic investment to be able to continue to access whatever that percentage may be, or an increased pot? If you, like yesterday you spoke about West Indies traveling to Australia, the cost of traveling for an away tour where they earn no income from TV rights. Can those be subsidized? All of these things have to come with accountability. And is there something that we can build into the distribution model where boards that are trying to develop this are given maybe even more depending on how they invest it? And that could be a way of really
And that
seeing
is
where
the
the money
model
is spent.
for
For
the distribution
associates.
to the associate members, who is
Scorecard.
all of the countries, the other 102 or whatever outside of the full members.
So the
It's
interesting
huge
thing is,
to receive a tiny amount of funding from ICC, Brazil or Serbia or Nigeria have to complete a balanced scorecard.
the full members don't.
Junior sections, adult sections, facilities investment, girls cricket, coaching development, officials. So there is a really good structure and accountability for ICC funding in the associate world. None of that applies to the full members.
Imagine if we had an independent board
That's-
which ensured that the full had to
ICC,
follow the
and fairness,
same- the
ICC have
same
tried
structure.
hard to implement that accountability for funding to full members.
But then the full members,
And then,
when you
and
get
of
to the
course,
board,
you
don't
get to the
vote for
board.
that.
And the point should be that that expectation shouldn't be only for boards or Sri Lanka, for all the boards.
Yes.
Correct,
It should be across the board
Of course.
for that entire
And
distribution.
you can bet your life that an independent, rather than a representative ICC board would look at that. Well, that would almost be their first job.
Yeah.
Their first thing they would do would be to say, we're giving out this amount of money. The associates operate like this. This seems to be good accountability. We can see growth. We can measure the investment. Let's apply that across the full members as well.
Humility.
And it probably makes it even more important to go back to Sanjog's point and what we discussed and what Graeme was saying. How do you grow the reach, the game, and the returns within that game, and more investment outside of what we've always been used to? Because that will also
Change things.
immensely change things even more.
Okay.
Can I also
yes, go on.
point, Mark, that often people are critical of Indian cricket, but we should be so grateful to Indian.
Yeah.
We also heard yesterday that the highest ticket price in America last year was the
India-Pakistan
versus
game.
Pakistan.
For all sport.
Yes.
All
For
sport.
All sport.
Yes.
Now, again, it just goes to show the incredible passion of Indian cricket and their funding. We should be grateful for that. We should.
But I felt that was an overriding impression of yesterday. I didn't sense any disaffection with
No,
India
but you
at
hear it a
all.
lot around the cricket. Oh, India are controlling the game and India get too much distribution. We didn't hear it in the room yesterday, but you often hear. But we should be so
No, but that
grateful.
was a well-informed
Room, yeah.
Yeah, of
that
course.
understand.
Of course.
And the reality is, out of the 1.45 billion fans, close to 1 billion is from
Just
the
about, yeah.
Asians, or more are from the
Yes.
Asian subcontinent.
Okay, we're going to close this down. We could talk all morning. We're going to finish with each of us each of us giving our one most valuable takeaway from yesterday's World Cricket Connects. And I don't mind who starts, but Kumar, you look ready to go.
Not really. I think change is inevitable, and if you don't stay relevant, then you're in worse trouble than you're now. Oh, I'm sorry, I think that's the wrong way to put it. I don't think the game's in trouble. I think the game's in a fantastically healthy place. But if you rest now without adapting and understanding what the game's going to be, then you can expect a lot of things to be reversed.
Okay, Claire.
I think it was really nice to hear from others on our panel, particularly about the huge growth opportunity for the game that is presented by the women's game. I think we often think about the women's game in isolation and that we've got to grow the women's game and grow the economy of the women's game and grow the fans of the women's game. The thinking we should have, and I think Matthew Wheeler said it, is the game's greatest growth opportunity is the women's game. The game as a whole will thrive if we get the women's game right.
Graeme?
I don't know. There was so much. Really. I mean, it's like, I think for me, it's, again, I'm going to go back to say it was just really great to be in the room, different perspectives, challenging thinking. I think that's the most important thing. Sanger says the game's healthy, it is, but we've got to challenge our thinking to say, how do we improve the game and going forward? And I think more collaboration is certainly needed. And that for me was yesterday's big takeaway.
Very good.
Collaboration is required.
Sanjog?
So can I make it 2 takeaways?
No,
They're linked.
only one.
No?
Quick takeaway.
I think the first, which links to what Sangha said, the future has to be proactively shaped. You can't wait for the future to happen to you, because if you do, then I'll go back to something that Stephen Fry said. You will be the family that's sitting with your back at the beach
To the
tsunami.
yeah.
And it will happen, because it will happen because the world is changing faster than ever before. Sport is changing faster than ever before, and media is changing faster than ever before. And cricket is a tiny planet in this solar system. And if the solar system is evolving more rapidly than ever before, this tiny planet will take a shape that none of us like if we don't start shaping it actively. And that's what that's the one line that remained with me from Stephen's talk, which was, you don't want to be the family that's sitting on the beach with your back to the tsunami. You want to be facing it, and you want to be riding the tallest wave possible, surfing the way that you want. And that can only happen if you're facing it and not have your back to it.
Lisa?
Preservation of status quo is not good enough anymore. The game will move past, and what we love will disappear.
I think the game's shown over many years that preservation of the status quo, we keep evolving. We're all ex-players. You evolve from a kid to be a test player to an international. You have to keep evolving or you die. If you haven't got a curious mind, and if you don't keep evolving, you die. Stephen Fry, you are brilliant. We grew up listening to it on the transistor radios, and then we watched black and white TVs, and then we watched it on TVs, and then sometimes you come to the ground, and now we can watch it in so many capacities. We'll keep evolving, and I've got confidence the game will keep growing and keep evolving, because there's enough really good people who love the game who will ensure that we don't have our back to the tsunami.
Okay, and mine would just be the governance thing that we touched on at the beginning. You can't govern a modern game with an old model, and that does need to be addressed. Thank you all very much for your time. What a fascinating morning in this famous old room. I mean, I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for coming to World Cricket Connects. Thanks to all of you who came to World Cricket Connects yesterday. And thanks to all our members here at MCC for listening. It was a very proud day for MCC yesterday, and one that was much appreciated by everybody in attendance. For the moment, from us, bye-bye.